today's podcast, we're going to cover the break method. So this is the overview of the training systems that I use to get people stupidly strong, but also not be all show, no go. So not only do we want their physique to look good, but we also want them to be ridiculously strong for day-to-day life. So the first part is we'll just talk about a little bit about the overview of the break method, who it's for, what it does, and what problem it's solving. So most intermediate lifters in the gym, so what is an intermediate? So an intermediate is someone that's been in the gym for a while, but they're stuck at a certain level. I would say you're not advanced until you can squat 3 plates, deadlift 4 plates, and bench 2 plates. Now that would be my characterization of advanced. So if you can't do all of those 3 things, you're not advanced yet. Or someone who has been stuck at a certain plateau or a certain level and just cannot get past that for the last year or 2 years. That would be who the break method is for. When you're stuck at that level, the reason you're stuck there is because you don't have a system in place to break past those plateaus. You don't have something in place to push past that level. And this is exactly what that's for. So I'm talking about pressing the 50 kilo dumbbells, getting to that level, squatting 4, 5, 6 plates, deadlifting 4, 5, 6 plates, even benching. I've got multiple people to bench 3 to 4 plates. Like myself, I'm nearly at a 200 kilo bench press now from sharpening knife, years and years of training, but also having a system in place. So when I hit a plateau, I can deal with that and put mechanisms in place so I can break that plateau. So that's what the break method, that's the problem it solves, okay? I'm going to spend sort of like 5 minutes on each of these topics to get you to try and break them down as quickly as possible, really. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer some questions at the end. I've got people to submit a load of questions, and then obviously I'll go through that. So one of the parts of the break method is intelligent benchmarks. So let's say you're trying to improve on deadlifts, and one of your benchmarks for that is your good morning. So let's say in one of your training waves, you have good mornings, 3 sets of 5 to 8 reps. So you have 2 moderate sets, 2 hard sets, however you want to spin it. You can usually do, let's say 100 kilos with good mornings. That's quite heavy, but let's say 100 kilos with good mornings. And you can do that for 8 reps, or the rep range is 5 to 8. And you do that for 8 reps. And then you go from 5 to 8, and then you go from 100 kilos doing 5 to 8, and you go to 110. So that would be a benchmark. So I know that my good morning has now brought up my deadlift. If I've put 10 kilos on my good morning, I would have probably put 2.5 kilos on my deadlift. Nearly in all cases, I find with good mornings, the reason I use that example is because a lot of people that do good mornings find that transfers directly over to deadlifts. So you've got to find benchmarks that transfer over to the lifts that you're trying to progress. And again, the break method doesn't work just for, let's say, squat, bench, deadlift. You could do calisthenics type stuff, so it could be pull-ups, press-ups, and some sort of leg movement, like a weighted squat. I mean, I don't really do calisthenics, but you could use that. It's the same mechanisms for everything in that aspect. It's still the same. So it doesn't have to be that. It's just got to make sure when you're choosing your benchmarks. So here's another example: bench press, close grip bench. So the stronger your close grip bench is, it usually always transfers over to a flat bench press, unless you've got specific shoulder injuries, but that's another topic. So you need to find your benchmarks, but they need to carry over to the lift you're trying to improve. If you just put random stuff in and you think, okay, that will probably improve it, you need to be noting down, okay, looking over the last 4, 8, 12 weeks, has that lift carried over, has that benchmark carried over to the lift I'm trying to improve? If it hasn't, take it out. Take it out. There's no reason for that to stay in there now because it's not carrying over, so take it out. All of these lifts will also build a hell of a lot of muscle and shape your physique. So you're killing two birds with one stone. And that is the premise of the break method, is that your physique is a side effect of the training, not the other way around. Because no one wants to be, like I said in the start, all show, no go. No one wants to look good, but then when they go to move a sofa from their moving house to go to move the sofa, their back goes. Yeah. Whereas your mate who does labouring or whatever, move the sofa easy. It's a bit embarrassing if you train 8 hours a week and you go to move a sofa and you fuck your back up. That's not what we're trying to build. We're trying to build built to last, resilient, unreal shape people. Yeah. So benchmarks. It adapts to the lifter. So the lifter, like we said, you're getting that constant feedback loop from those benchmarks to see if it's driving progress. And then that also exposes weaknesses. Don't get too obsessed with weaknesses though. And we're going to get onto the conjugate influence of the break method. Because this is very, very similar to conjugate. I've taken things from conjugate. I've taken things from people like Ed Cohen. I've taken things from people like Stan Efferdin. I've taken things from people like Ben Pollock. But the overview of the break method is effectively a form of conjugate. And in my opinion, I actually said this in a Westside podcast the other day, this is a strong opinion, but all newer programs are a form of conjugate, which I 100% believe, because all of the new methods have been driven from Westside. Not everything, but a lot of things have been influenced by Westside. For example, belt squats, glute ham raise, not Nordic leg curls, inverse curls, all of these things that all started at Westside. But again, that's another topic. So exposes the weaknesses. Don't get too obsessed with weaknesses, because we want to focus on building a well-rounded physique and a well-rounded, strong physique in all areas. So as long as we cover all of those areas and make sure that we're setting our benchmarks, then we haven't got to focus too much on weaknesses. If something becomes really obvious and apparent, so for example, your lockout on bench, that's always the problem, then we know it's triceps. But again, don't get too obsessed with that. The next thing is strength is the primary driver of progress. So the break method is built on the idea that progression is one of the most reliable drivers of long-term muscle growth. So when your key lifts consistently improve, your body has to adapt by building more muscle, right? So whatever way you look at it, yes, your central nervous system might be stronger. Yes, the Golgi tendon might be stronger. If you don't know that will, again, that's something you need to look into, because it's not something I'd cover. I don't want to add more time to this podcast. But them two things can improve, and you don't have to necessarily gain muscle to get stronger. However, we want that to be one of the effects, to consistently gain muscle to also get stronger. If you've got more tissue around the bones, if you've got more tissue around the joints, you're going to get stronger. Yeah. But we also want to strengthen the nervous system. So again, going back to not all show, no go. So we're not just building sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So the size of the cells, we're building the density of the cells. The density of the cells is strength. The amount the cells can hold sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is more your bodybuilding stuff. We still want to do that because that's going to protect us from the bigger lifts. That's also going to build muscle, so we look fucking unreal. But we want both of those effects to be working at the same time. This goes into like concurrent training. So you're training different strengths at multiple times. One of the things I don't believe in is training in blocks. I think it's fucking stupid, right? Again, listen, it works for loads of people, but there's better ways of doing this now. Why would you want to do a hypertrophy block, a strength block, and then get weak in one area. We want to be driving all strengths at the same time, so we get stronger in everything concurrently. That's what concurrent training is. It's multiple things riding side by side, so you get stronger in multiple different strengths, or whatever it may be, conditioning, whatever it may be. A lot of coaches still train in blocks. Listen, if it works for you, great. If you've got successful athletes, great. Do I think it's the best way? No. Highest return movements. So the system focuses on progressing the movements that deliver the highest return for both strength and physique development. So not only do we want movements that transfer to our lifts, but we want movements that are also transferring to our physique, right? Because no one wants to be the fat as fuck powerlifter that go, oh yeah, I can bench 250. No one fucking cares. Yeah, you look like fucking that thing out of Star Wars. Okay, so listen, if that's your primary goal, and I get powerlifters that do that, just push the weight as much as they can, so that they can get as strong as possible. But to me, and probably to you watching this, it's probably not for you, right? You want to look good as well. So we want the lifts that also transfer to the physique. One that's on the top of my mind is flat dumbbell bench. In my opinion, incline flat dumbbell bench. I think that is the best chest exercise you can possibly do to develop your chest. Incline dumbbell bench. I've never seen anyone, unless they're holding a lot of body fat, with pressing 50, 60, 70 kilo dumbbells on incline dumbbell bench for reps, and they have bad pecs. Never. It's the same as big benchers. When do you see, I'm not talking about benchers that do this mad arching stuff. I'm talking about people that are actually doing bench press. When do you see someone with a massive bench and small pecs? You don't. So again, highest return movements. So they're also returning, they're also transferring to the physique as well, not just strength. So an enforced adaptation through progressive overload. So what a lot of people say there, like, especially when you're trying to go from, which is a lot of the women, guys and girls I help, is they're stuck at that intermediate lifter level, that what we were speaking about earlier. And they say that, okay, I'm a hard gainer. I really struggle to put on muscle mass. Well, I tell you what, if you force the adaptation through progressive overload, you force it. So you go from, going back to incline dumbbell bench, you go from pressing the 30 kilo dumbbells to the 50 kilo dumbbells. I guarantee you there is going to be a difference in muscle mass. I actually guarantee it. It's impossible. If you can do 30 kilo dumbbells for 10 reps and then you go to 40 kilo dumbbells for 10 reps, it is impossible for there not to be an adaptation of you to grow more muscle. So we sometimes have to force the adaptation. I remember having a guy I used to train, and he was one of these guys, really, really struggled with gaining muscle, really struggled at intermediate level. So I tried him on a normal plan for about 2-3 months. Didn't see a lot of progress. Just a normal plan, didn't see a lot of progress. And that's very rare for me, because I've been coaching for 9 years. So it's very rare that I would see that. I was like, okay, cool. We're going to really force the progress. So we focused on movements. Like, for example, one might be leg press, the other be hack squat. We focus on pushing those movements. The next 2 months, everything moved, and then you saw a clear difference in his physique. Completely clear. You couldn't even argue it. There's a clear difference within that 8 weeks, because we focused on forced adaptation rather than just sort of psychoplasmic hypertrophy, just sort of repping the weight out, getting a pump, trying to get a bit bigger. I'm not saying that's what I'd usually focus on, but with this particular guy, we had to really focus on the movements, trim down the volume, so that we could get that forced adaptation. Focusing on the movements with the greatest impact. And some of you watching this, that's what you're going to have to do. So, for example, if you've been stuck with, let's say keep on that same line, the incline dumbbell bench, and a lot of guys struggle to develop their pecs. That cannot always be because of the training. Sometimes that is, well, a lot of time that's because of technique, or what a lot of guys do, especially, actually just everyone in general, is they press towards their face and they line the elbow up with their shoulder. Whereas what we want to do when we're trying to develop the pec is bring the elbow down, line it up with the sternum, press up slightly across so that we're lengthening and shortening the pec enough. And also, obviously, arch the chest. So provided, let's say your technique isn't the problem, let's say it is the training, then we might want to say start putting dumbbell press in twice a week, 2 to 3 sets. And again, focusing on progressing that weight, then maybe adding one more pec movement in to just blow up the pecs, like a form of fly or 2 forms of fly. So 2 sets of incline cable fly, 2 sets of decline cable fly. If you do that and focus on the pec and also make sure that your food's good and your sleep's good, I guarantee you're going to make some form of progression. There's no doubt about it. You're going to make some form of progression, whether that be physique or strength. We want to obviously tackle them concurrently, but you're going to see an increase in both of those, providing your sleep, your food, and your recovery is good, and your general health is obviously good as well. So strength is a primary driver of progress. And then let's talk a little bit about, let's finish with talking about the conjugate influence. So I'll give you an overview of part of the break method plan. So we have the break method plan, which is again the overview. We have the break first fuel plan, which is the nutrition strategy. And we have the built to last framework. But in this podcast, I'm just going to cover the break method. So just the general structure of the training program. Just the general structure. That's what we're going to cover today. But I want to give you the exact overview of how we do it. So we generally have 4 training days. Obviously, you can do a 3-day plan, but that would rotate. But let's just talk about a 4-day plan. So lower, upper. And we want to space the 2 days, because they're the heavier days. We want to put a rest day between those days, because that is going to accumulate a lot of fatigue. And generally, we don't want the previous day affecting the next day, especially if we're trying to put a maximal effort lift in there. Because let's say if we do heavy good mornings and then we do heavy bench, our upper back might still be fatigued from the heavy good mornings. So we want to put a day between that. So you have your 2 heavy days and your 2 light days. That's why I said there's a conjugate influence, a west side conjugate influence. The structure itself is effectively conjugate. Listen, I didn't invent toilet paper, but I'm smart enough to use it. So anyone coach who tells you, oh, it's all my programming, I invented it, they're chatting out their arse. Yeah, they're chatting out their arse. So conjugate influence, that's the structure. 2 heavy days, 2 light days. The 2 light days you can do back to back, but generally lower, upper. And we want to make sure that we space 72 hours between the lowers, 72 hours between the uppers, and then also 1 rest day between the heavy lower and the heavy upper. Like I said, because we don't want that affecting their max effort lifts, because we're trying to progress them over the weeks. Then as far as the actual structure inside the sessions, on the heavy days, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our max effort lift. So that could be incline bench. Let's talk about the lowers actually. That could be squat, just normal squat. That could be safety bar squat. That could be pause squat. Could be box squat. You get the idea. Usually on the 4th week, you'll put in a form of good morning or a form of squat that you can do much less weight on to give the central nervous system a break. So, for example, the week 4 could be front squat. It could be a heavy good morning. It could be Zercher squat, because it's very unlikely you're going to be able to Zercher or front squat the same weight you can do for a back squat. If you can, I'll be very impressed. But so, yeah, that 4th week, you're giving the central nervous system a break. So the actual struggle is the same for you. In your brain, you don't know the difference. You're like, that was still a max effort. It's still really hard. But your nervous system does. Your nervous system knows the difference, because the total weight lifted is different. So you have then 2 heavy days. Then you have your secondary exercise. The way Westside do it, and my actual current coach for myself, Burley Hawk, he has a main secondary movement. So, for example, what we were talking about earlier, a movement that transfers over to the lift, so close grip bench. If you're doing lowers, RDLs, something along those lines. I don't necessarily do it all like that myself. I've chopped and changed a lot for what I've found works for my clients and works for my athletes. And it can be a little bit individual as well. So you have your main max effort, then your secondary movement, and then usually sort of 4 to 6. I mean, 6 would be on the really high end, and that would be probably just grip work towards the end. But your max effort, your main movement, and then 4 to 5 accessory movements. So there we're working on building a well-rounded physique, strong in different areas, and just building a well-rounded program, and also working on hypertrophy in those movements. Most of the time, as far as the reps, we're going to be sticking between. So for our max effort, we're going to be looking at 1 to 5 reps, rarely 5s, but sometimes it will be. Most of the work will be 1 to 3, but let's say 1 to 5. And then your second movement, you'll be looking at sort of anywhere between 4 to 8 reps. That's what I would do. That's not necessarily how Westside does it, but that's how I would do it. And then your next couple of movements will probably be more in the 6 to 20 rep range. Unlikely 20 reps. Most of the bulk of the work is going to be sort of 6 to 10 to 12, but anywhere between 6 to 20 reps, because you might want to put some high reps in to protect your elbows and your joints. When you do the higher reps, it helps thicken the ligaments and tendons faster. And probably some science bros watching this saying, "No, that's not true." Well, I've seen it. It's something that Westside used to use. It's a lot of athletes use their higher reps, and guess what? The joint pain goes away. So also you want to incorporate higher reps. So that's the general structure of the sessions. And then on the second 2 days, your lighter days or your speed days, you're working on rate of force development. So you're working on moving the bar faster. So what we're trying to do there is, with the max effort, we're recruiting as much muscle fibers as possible. But with the dynamic effort, we're trying to reduce the amount of time it takes to complete a rep. If you can move a weight faster, you can move a bigger weight. Simple as that. So we were working on dynamic effort. Again, I don't necessarily do it the traditional Westside way. In my opinion, that probably is the most effective way, but not everyone. Most people are not going to want to set. A lot of people are not going to want to set up bands and not going to want to set up chains. So I think there's just too much room for error for a lot of people, unless they're really experienced and they're already at that advanced level. Then you can have that conversation going from there. But most people, bands, chains, forget about that for a little bit, unless you want to do that at your max efforts. That's quite simple. But for the dynamic effort or speed day, I wouldn't include that, because there's just too much room for error. And you're just going to get frustrated trying to find the right band tension. You've got to get I've got a crane scale, like a suitcase scale that checks the tension. And a lot of lifters, especially the high train, are not going to want to do that. So I've found myself, for the dynamic effort, is we use Prilipin's chart, which is an effective rep range. Optimal rep range, that's what Prilipin's chart is. And then we also use a certain percentage. So most of my clients and athletes stick between 60 to 75%. And if you ever look at Ed Cohen's training, big bulk of his training was actually between 60 to 75. Yeah, 60 to 75. The same as me. And I found that transfer has worked really well. So we can see as the waves go on, because it's undulating periodization. So the way we personally do it is 60 to 70% with the optimal reps. And you see over the weeks, you do that first 3-week rotation. Then on the second 3 weeks, when clients send me videos, the bar speed is much quicker. So guess what? They've got stronger because the bar speed's quicker. If we have that intention in that session, the bar speed moves much faster. So therefore, we'll get stronger. It doesn't have the same force production effects because we're not using bands or chains. but you will still get stronger from that regardless. And some people prefer that. I mean, like I said, look at Ed Cohen. Ed Cohen's one of scratch that, he's the best powerlifter of all time. You've got Colton Engelbert now, but still, it's not the level of Ed Cohen. Ed Cohen, I believe, is like 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 different weight categories. And I believe he held records up till like 2000. I mean, I'd have to check that, but incredible. One of the best powerlifters of all time. And I think that was maybe 70s or 80s. So that's your framework. So 2 heavy days and 2 lighter dynamic effort days. Then after those, same again, you would have well-rounded accessories. Sometimes you might have a main, like a benchmark movement, like we were talking about earlier. Sometimes you might not. We just want to focus on like well-rounded bodybuilding movements. Now, one of the feedback I get from this is, well, how am I going to get enough hypertrophy? How am I going to get enough bodybuilding effect as such when I'm training all my upper body at once, all my lower body at once? All I can say to you is try it and see what happens. Forget about more is not better. Better is better. Okay. And that's what people think. They think, okay, I need to do this many sets on biceps a week, this many sets on triceps. Well, if you have intent that you're progressing those movements, but also progressing the reps, also focusing on mind muscle connection, so that we're trying to build that muscle and focusing on intent and recovery, then you might see, I mean, like I did a couple of years ago when I was at 21, I'd been stuck and plateaued for probably 2 years. And then I reduced my training to 4 or 5 days. And instantly everything went up. And I started putting on muscle again. I started getting much stronger again. Because my attitude, it wasn't so much that I knew more is not better, better is better. I knew that. But I wasn't sort of applying that as much as I should have been. I kept adding volume, adding sets, adding an exercise. When there was a real no need to, I just needed to have more intent in the sessions. So again, 2 heavy days, 2 light days, and then you can have an optional accessory day. If you're watching this now, it's probably not the case for you. Most people do not need an accessory day. You might need a conditioning or cardio day. That's another thing to add to the break method is conditioning. Is try and get sort of 180 minutes of cardio per week, whether that's fast-paced walking, whether that's an assault bike, whether that's a rowing machine, just 180 minutes at a minimum. So if you're getting like 10, 15,000 steps a day, that will probably cover you depending on how quickly you're walking. I personally would still add a conditioning day so that your resting blood pressure is better, because the better your resting blood pressure is, the better your recovery generally will be. Blood pressure indicates a lot of things. The better your recovery all is. With all of that said, I'm going to wrap up there a little bit. But with all of that said, even with the perfect training system, outlining all those days and perfect movements, perfect benchmarks, if your recovery, your health is not in check, so your sleep, your resting blood pressure, your hormones, don't worry too much about hormones unless that becomes an issue, but I would look at getting blood work as well. So let's say you've done all this, you're watching this, you've done all of this, you've implemented it, but you're still not making progress. My first point of call would be get your blood work done. See what your blood work says, because if that's off, then of course you're not going to progress in this because your general health's not there. If your blood pressure's high, before you do any of this, get your blood pressure down. It's as simple as that, get that down. And then if your blood work is good and your blood pressure is normal, get a coach. Just get a coach. It doesn't have to be me. It could just be the coach of your choice. I would make sure you get a coach that chooses more of these methods concurrent. But get yourself a coach, because there must be something that you're doing wrong. Simple as that. But if you're not going to get a coach, first thing to look at is blood work, general health. We'll wrap up there. But again, that's probably not going to be almost guarantee 99.9% of you are not going to be that person, and it's going to be to do with that you've not got a system in place. So use the break method. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a couple of questions that I've got from Instagram on the last 5 or 10 minutes. So, questions. Let's get the questions up. How is the break method different from just following a normal bodybuilding program? Well, I hope I've covered that a little bit already. But we focus on strength as well. So we focus on the Built to Last framework. We focus on the Break First fuel plan. So we're looking at eating as much whole foods as possible, while focusing also on digestion so that day to day we feel good, we look good, and we don't get any health problems later in life or anything like that. So we focus on that. And then we also have a high focus on strength, so that when you stay in those lower rep ranges, we're also focusing on sarcoplasmic myofibular hypertrophy. So we're also focusing on general strength, being able to move things heavy for one rep if you was ever to, do day-to-day tasks. I mean, the other day I had to lift the drain cover off. Wasn't an issue. Picked it up, moved the drain cover off. But a lot of people, especially bodybuilders, might reach down to pick it up because they're just used to doing leg presses or some dumb shit that you see now, fucking single leg cuff side raise bullshit. But yeah, so we're focusing on that strength movement that applies day to day, not just applying to the gym. So that's what's different about the break method. Do I have to be strong or ready to use the break method? No, absolutely not. No. You can build that strength over time. I would say, though, you need to be at an intermediate level, or at least sort of just past a beginner, like you've at least trained for a couple of months, at least 6 months, because I wouldn't start implementing all these methods if you can barely do, for example, body weight squats. This is not the right program for you, and that's fine. You need to start at a different level and then eventually work up to something like this. Won't rotating exercises slow down my progress on the main lifts? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because the reason being is because we need to avoid repetitive strain. So when we rotate exercise, we're not just doing random stuff. And some exercises we're not rotating. So things like push downs and stuff, that's not that important to rotate. And some things might recur every other week. So like bent over rows, stuff like that. Don't get too fixated on rotations. Again, actually, Burley was talking about this the other day. People get too focused on the specialty movements. So it's conjugate or a form of conjugate. It's not just about rotating movements all the time. That's not what it's just about. So no, that'll actually add to your ability rather than take away from it. Look at every favourite lifter you probably know that just does the barbell movements. They're all in a bad way. And if you say to someone, what about this kid who's 21? Well, he's 21. Wait till he's 31. But no, rotating exercises won't affect that. What if I don't know what my weak points are? Not a problem. It's built into a well-rounded physique, well-rounded structure, well-rounded strength movement patterns. So we're just focusing on making sure everything is equal and opposite so that we're good at all different strengths. Your weak points will become apparent. Once you start following a system like this, it will become really obvious. If you're pressing 30 kilo dumbbells, but you can only row 10 kilo dumbbells, where's your weak point? Your back. So they will become apparent anyway. Don't worry if that still becomes confusing, because it's not an issue. As long as you're progressing, your physique's changing, it doesn't matter. Is the program more strength focused? It is to an extent. But it doesn't mean you're not going to build a hell of a lot of muscle. Look at some of the best powerlifters; they're all huge, going to build a lot of muscle. But again, this is the beauty of a concurrent or a conjugate program, is you can adapt the program to what your goals are. If you don't want to gain loads of muscle, then you can just adapt your diet. or what we use, the break first fuel plan, you can adapt that to the amount of muscle you want to gain. So everything about it is being adapted in real time. Again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, is training in blocks. This is not how it works. We can adapt it all in real time. If we have something bad in that session, we can take it out from that session and onwards. We don't have to wait till the block finishes to then change it, which is the silliest way to train, in my opinion. So yeah, it's not just strength focus. You will see a hell of a lot of muscle you can adapt it to. If you want it to lean more into the side of bodybuilding hypertrophy, then you can lean it more that way. You would just do less of the barbell movements and more of the hypertrophy movements. However, I still think you want to keep that at sort of 20% of your total work wants to be barbell movements, so you don't become weak day to day. With all that said, thanks for watching. Share the podcast, send it around. This is, like I said, this is the first episode of the podcast, so hopefully we get some good responses. If you want to ask a question for next time, drop me a DM on Instagram. I'll probably put a questions box up anyway. But thank you for watching.